Hello, and welcome to our Leadership Series webinar, co-hosted by Stanford Inspire and NCUST. My name is Amanda Rothengast, and I'm the Program Manager for Stanford Inspire, and we are honored to be co-presenting this series to support school leaders or aspiring leaders in such challenging times. Before we get started, I would like to let you know a bit more about this series. This presentation is the opinions and content of our guest speakers and panelists and may not necessarily be a direct representation of Stanford Inspire or NCUST. This is the third recorded webinar in our series designed for you to watch at any time. We encourage you to share it with your colleagues. Now, it is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Johnson, the Executive Director of the National Center for Urban School Transformation. Dr. Johnson?
Hello and welcome. My name is Joseph Johnson. I serve as the Executive Director of the National Center for Urban School Transformation, INCUST. INCUST identifies, awards, and studies schools that achieve outstanding learning results for all students. We are pleased to welcome you to the fourth session of Reopening Schools with a focus on SEL and Equity. By the end of this series, we hope that participating schools will have stronger, more complete plans for how they will ensure a socially, emotionally healthy reopening in a way that advances true equity in learning outcomes. In the first session, we emphasized why planning for reopening is so important. In the second session, our panel of experts offered many specific ideas about how educators could plan strategies for listening to the social emotional needs of students, families, and staff. In the third session, the panel emphasized the importance of ensuring that reopening plans responded to the social, emotional, and academic needs of students, families, and staff. Recordings and presentation slides for all previous sessions have been emailed to the participants. Today's fourth session will emphasize the critical importance of building the capacity of school personnel to respond to students' social emotional needs. Remember to take note of strategies shared by our panelists so you can enhance your planning efforts for the opening of the school year. We are inviting you to complete a quick form online to share one aspect of your reopening plan based on the concepts discussed throughout this series. We will select a few ideas submitted to highlight during the final live webinar on July 30th, where our panelists will provide feedback. If you are interested in sharing, please visit the link that you received with this email by July 22nd. Before we proceed, my colleague at NCUST, Dr. Jose Iniguez, will recap some of the major points addressed in the third webinar session that focused on responding to the social emotional needs of students, families, and staff.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Hello, all. In our last session, our panel of experts and principals described 7 strategies to help make the return to school a positive experience for students and staff. 1, intentionally plan instruction to provide students with a voice to facilitate sharing and to increase agency. 2, make a concerted effort to learn more about feelings and needs to help normalize struggles and concerns. 3, teach students how to support one another academically and emotionally. 4, improve staff capacity to recognize and address social emotional needs within a tiered approach. 5, create videos for families and students demonstrating how the return to school will look and feel. This strategy helps to reduce anxiety of the unknown. 6, incorporate an explicit growth mindset approach, helping to normalize student struggles with learning loss, as well as to increase resiliency. 7, maintain visibility and accessibility to reassure students and to gauge their needs and concerns. As mentioned earlier by Dr. Johnson, please watch the recorded webinar for additional details, including specific practices or examples of practices within each of the strategies mentioned. Thank you. I now return our presentation to Dr. Johnson.
Thanks, Dr. Iniguez, for that recap of the last session. Today, we will focus more specifically on how schools and districts can build everyone's capacity to address the social emotional needs that students, families, and staff are experiencing. We're fortunate to have an impressive panel of educational experts. Today's panel includes winners of the 2019 Stanford Teaching Award. These individuals were named the top inspirational teacher in their state and qualified for the honor of being named the nation's top inspirational teacher in 2019. Our outstanding teacher panelists include Linda Amici from Alcott Elementary in Westerville, Ohio, Sarah Freyer from Woodridge International School in Washington, D.C., Leah Julke from Fargo South High School in Fargo, North Dakota, Claudine James from Malvern Middle School in Malvern, Arkansas, and Laura Thompson from William F. Cook Jr. Elementary in Hockessin, Delaware. Additionally, we're fortunate to have 3 outstanding award-winning principals. These principals lead schools that are winners of the America's Best Urban Schools Award. Even though their schools serve low-income communities with all the challenges we associate with urbanicity, every demographic group of students in their school outperforms statewide averages for all students. I'm pleased to introduce Lauren Malhoit, principal of James DeAnda Elementary in Houston, Texas, Kevin Grauer, principal of Maplewood Richmond Heights High School in St. Louis, Missouri, and Alexa Sorden, principal of Concourse Village Elementary in Bronx, New York. Panelists, thank you for joining us. Before we can help students manage their social emotional well-being, we adults need to do a good job of managing our own social emotional well-being, which isn't easy in these difficult times. So my question to you is, in difficult times, what strategies have you employed to ensure your own social emotional well-being? And as schools prepare to reopen, what should schools or districts plan to do to help teachers use similar strategies? Ms. James, let's start with you.
Hello, and thank you, Dr. Johnson, for this opportunity. Recently, I experienced the death of my niece, which was also a student of mine. And it just occurred to me after that loss that as a teacher, I don't always have all the answers. And I sometimes may need help as well. And it began me just to think about this question and like, what can I do to get help, or how can administration help and support me? And I've come up to the conclusion there's just one thing. And first of all, realizing that you need help, and that as teachers, just because we are teachers, we don't always have all the answers. And so I found that listening, find someone that can listen to you, that you can bounce your ideas off of, they can act as a sounding board, because we have to be willing as educators to realize that we do not know everything. And I think no matter where the school you're at, anywhere in the United States, this year, you have to realize that we are going into uncharted water for sure. And so one of the things that I am happy about is that I have an administration that will listen to me, that will allow the voices of the teachers to be heard, and also, most importantly, recognize the fact that teachers sometimes are just afraid as the students are. And we can't help our students if we are afraid. So I hope that all school administrators will take this opportunity to do something if they've never done it before, be the first time to let teachers talk, listen to your teachers, and not only your teachers, but your support staff, and be willing, most of all, be willing to recognize that everyone is entering this afraid and just uncertain of what the outcome will be. I saw a quote recently that said 9/10 of education is encouragement. And I think that that's what all educators need. We need that encouragement so that we are filled up to the brim with encouragement, and we in turn can use that encouragement to inspire and encourage our students. Thank you so much for this opportunity to provide insight into this very difficult situation that all American educators, actually educators all around the world, are facing. Thank you so much.
Excellent answer, Ms. James. Thank you so much. Ms. Julke, what's your answer to this question?
Well, as a single mom of a 3-year-old and an 8-year-old, it is definitely, it has been difficult being at home and teaching online Zoom classes almost every hour from 8 to 3 p.m. So in that case, I feel like I'm always on, even more so than I was when I was at school. Teachers think about their students all the time. When we go to bed, we're trying to figure out how to solve Sally's problem. But even more so when your home becomes your work at the same time, it has been a challenge. So one thing that I've really started to do is to think about maintaining boundaries and to really turn off that cell phone, that computer, that work email, even though I really want to check it just to make sure. I need to maintain those boundaries, and that's something I really had to learn during this period. And also, one thing as well, I've been looking into things that, like gratitude journaling, things that, what could I do to help myself and my well-being to make myself feel joy? And I think joy is a thing that we have to look into as educators for ourselves and not just our students. Also, there's many apps out there. I got into yoga. There's a free yoga app. And just doing some of that physical activity has really helped me really kind of help my social emotional well-being at this time. Now, when we go back to school, one thing that my administrators could definitely help us with is acknowledging the teachers and their difficulties in the situation. We already had a self-care poster in our let's say our health room, and we would go in there and we would put ideas of self-care on this poster so other educators could see it, and they could also do similar ideas, such as just taking a walk during your prep period. You would not believe how many people just sit in their room during their prep period because they need to get stuff done. But you need that conversation. Take a walk with another teacher. And administrators should be encouraging that social interaction among teachers as well, because it really helps our social well-being.
Those are really nice ideas, Ms. Julke. Thank you so much. So Ms. Thompson, what strategies have helped you ensure your social emotional well-being, and what should schools or districts do to help their teachers use similar strategies?
Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson. First and foremost, one of the ways that I've tried to ensure my social emotional well-being is really temper the reading that I'm doing about the pandemic. Make sure on good news sources, for instance. But it has been overwhelming at times. So then I've relied on some physical activity, like hiking. I took an 8-mile walk this morning, or kayaking. I've yoga as well. Yoga, I think, is a great way to relax. And currently, I'm also finding some other kinds of focus because I'm working on my PhD. So that's helping to keep me sane as well. And I've talked to a few colleagues about things that they've done for well-being and how administrators might support them when they return to school. And one colleague talked about having that opportunity. I know that Ms. Jolke was talking about having that opportunity to interact with other people and as a choice. And then I had another colleague who said that they would like to have the choice to be able to be in their room, but turn off their computer monitor, turn off the phone as was suggested, but have just a few moments in their room to look out the window and relax. And then opportunities where maybe some people during that time, and my colleague also suggested perhaps an extra 30 minutes a week for these kind of opportunities. So for instance, allowing a possibility of structured mindfulness, or allowing that flexibility of letting the individual staff member seek whatever supports they personally need. And another colleague reminded me of things that Principal Sorten had mentioned at an earlier session, such as morning huddles or colleague check-ins. And then another teacher suggested one-on-one sessions with the principal or administrators at the very beginning of the year, before school even starts, so that you can get an individualized pep talk and have that opportunity to get some of those worries and concerns out, so that when kids would return to school, the teachers are able to serve that role as safe havens or rocks for their students as needed. So it's impossible to set out a single response in this situation that would be suitable for everyone involved, basically because every teacher or staff member is responding to this pandemic in a different way. And because of this, administrators have to have a variety of responses, for instance, such as morning huddles, but then also offering that opportunity so that an individual can respond the way that they need to with respect to their social emotional well-being in these situations. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson, I'm sorry. Ms. Freyer, would you like to answer the same question?
Hi, yes, thank you so much. A lot of the colleagues have said a lot of the same things that I have been doing. As a teacher that had COVID-19 while teaching, this topic is very personal to me. And some of the things that I did was to be honest that I'm not okay. That's the thing. It's like teachers need to be able to say they're not okay and that you just don't have to do it all. Another thing that really helped is having that person that you can talk to. My admins were very supportive when I was going through and afterwards, because they would do check-ins, not just with me, but just with staff as well on a weekly basis. We would have a day where we know where we could talk to one of the admins about what's going on in our life and how we're feeling, and that was very helpful. Meditation was really good for me as well, and prayer. I'm a spiritual person, and yoga and working out was really good. But the key thing for helping me was just to be honest that I'm not okay, and I don't have to do it all. Some of the things that I think administrators could do coming up for the next school year is make that safe place for the teachers to talk and have those check-ins. If it's possible, I would say make the workday not as long. If they can make the workday between like 9 and 1, that would be great for teachers, because you have teachers that are at home with their children and their family as well. Or even we go back into school, the rules that are being placed that lunch has to take place in the classroom. Everything has to stay in there once those 10 people are in the classroom, and you need time to breathe. You need time to go out. So that's going to be the scenario. I know things are still getting finalized, but I don't think we should have such a regular long day. Another thing is to have times where your staff can go online and do meditation breaks, do yoga breaks, just like we would give the students those movement breaks. Allow that too for the staff. Thank you again for this question and this opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Freyer, and thanks for your very important suggestions. Principal Grauer, what's your personal strategy, and what should schools or districts do to help educators use similar strategies to handle socially, emotionally stressful situations?
Thanks for that question, Dr. Johnson. Can you guys hear me okay? I've had some difficulties.
Yes, we can hear you.
Wonderful. Well, I won't echo all the wonderful things my esteemed colleagues have just said, but I'll add to it is that I really think laughter and humor is an important part of our life, and I try to ensure I embed that in my daily round and also at work as well. Humor to me is therapeutic, and we need to also balance our perspective of a very difficult time with some humorous aspects. As for a district, what I can do, or what I suggest doing, is including forgiveness and risk-taking as part of our relationship pillars with our staff. With this momentous change the last academic quarter and likely more on the horizon, people need clarity, feedback, and reassurance from leadership that what they're doing is okay or could be a little better. So every meeting and interaction I have, I'm concerned with a couple of things that I bring personally. Number one, what energy am I bringing and modeling? Because I think energy is a skill and it can be honed. Number two, am I being clear to take any doubt or pressure away from staff with what I'm asking them to do? I usually start each interaction or meeting with the same sentence, which is the following. You've had a great meeting if, and then I put 3 bullets after it. These 3 things can happen. This, I find, allows educators clarity, which builds confidence and takes away any self-doubt that they may be off course a little bit. This also means leaders might have to postpone or cut some important items for a later date to make sure that we're giving them manageable chunks to work with that are also attainable, which also builds confidence. Those are some of the things I like to do with my staff.
Those are great answers. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Principal Thornton, what else might schools do to build the capacity of their personnel to support students, families, and each other in making re-entry a more positive experience?
That's a great question, Dr. Johnson, and I'm excited to answer it. And I'm going to stick to the part where it says a more positive experience. So when I'm thinking about what I can do as a school leader for our personnel, is to definitely say this is something that we've been looking forward to. This is something that we're planning, that we've been planning really well. And this is a way for us to get back to what was our norm in a safe manner. And in order to make sure that our personnel feels that they are able to provide the support that they need for our students and our families, I need to make sure that we're all on the same page. I need to communicate with them frequently throughout the summer, frequently in a systematic way where they're receiving emails either every Tuesday and Thursday with any updates. I also like to send emails that have more visuals and less words. Whenever possible, I create videos so that I could express myself with visuals, and so they don't have to read as much, but definitely making sure that our staff is informed, knowing that I have teachers, I have main office staff, and I have school support staff that consist of aides and guidance counselors, and making sure that they have all the pertinent information that they need so that when they're in front of our families in September, they feel informed, they feel prepared, and that they can answer questions. So I would definitely say make sure that we have information, make sure that we have the most updated information, and make sure that when I'm conveying the message, I'm excited. I'm excited to have my kids back. I'm excited to be with my staff. And the way that I convey the message is the way that it'll be received. So I want my team to be able to welcome our families and our scholars back with that same excitement, knowing that we're going to do our best to keep them safe and to get back some sense of that normalcy that we were accustomed to before the pandemic. Thank you.
Those are excellent ideas that could really help school personnel, help everyone approach re-entry more positively. Thank you so much. Principal Malhoit, Let's extend this question more broadly to professional development. What are the most important professional development topics schools should consider as they think about preparing teachers and other personnel to address social and emotional needs that might relate to everyone's COVID-19 experiences?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Johnson. I think this question is very applicable to school leaders right now. I'm sure many principal and district leaders can attest that summertime is planning time for the next school year. And now with COVID-19 pandemic, it's affected all of us. So our planning has to have COVID-19 on the forefront. And I would offer two main domains of what PD needs to look like in addition to regular school PD. The first one should be around anxiety and stress of teachers and our students. And the second one should be on building and maintaining relationships, whether in person, virtual, or hybrid. So first, teachers and staff are always used to being the caregiver. After all, this is a service profession. So as Ms. Freyer mentioned earlier, it's okay to not be okay. But if you're not okay, we want our students and our staff and our teachers to speak up. So we should be providing professional development on self-care. Perhaps we can brainstorm together by directly asking teachers and our staff, what do you need? What ways can the school support you? And what ways can our campus community support each other? Taking advantage of mental health hotlines, conveying empathy. Everyone's experiences are different, and so finding avenues and ways to support the needs of the staff and the team, and then empowering teachers to get help if they need it. School administrators and campus leaders can have open door policies. I may not know all the answers, but I have many connections with the district and with the city that would be willing to find if someone on my campus needed help. With students, I think we need to teach our teachers professional development on how to convey strategies on how students can deal with emotions and provide opportunities for students to share strategies. What if we're using read alouds to create opportunities for empathy? Teachers can share tools that they use, like being active, walking each day, or journaling. But I also think it's really critical that we teach media literacy to students. Help students develop skills in evaluating information that they read or hear. A lot of times kids can feel overwhelmed or anxious by just watching a clip of the news or watching a Facebook post that we may or may not know if there's credibility. And as Ms. Julke mentioned earlier, which I loved because I've heard this several times, is continuing to emphasize joy in classrooms and joy in our schools. Let's let our students create. Let's show our student work, whether it's on Twitter, online, in a Google Classroom, or posted in a hallway. Now, the second PD that I think is really critical is building virtual or continuing to build in-person relationships. We know that student and teacher relationships has a very positive correlation, and students are more likely to learn from teachers that they feel a connection with. So how do we do that if we are starting virtually? Let's continue to do the same things that we would do in class, just with a twist. So let's send individual messages. It might normally be a welcome message from the teacher, but maybe now it's an email. Or let's hold office hours. We normally have a planning time or a period during the day where students can ask questions. Let's continue to do that, but be creative in how we're assessing that. So I hope those are some opportunities that people can take advantage of and look forward to as we plan our PD for next year.
Those are great ideas, important professional development topics. Principal Grauer, do you have some other suggestions for professional development that could build the capacity of educators?
Oh, yes. Thanks, Dr. Johnson. Here's some things I'm thinking about regarding PD. I see three glaring areas right now in this time and place in our nation's history with regards to public schooling. Number one is social emotional teaching and learning. Number two is blended learning practices, which will enhance our virtual learning practices as well as our in-house teaching practices. And number three is the ever-present and glaring race, gender, privilege issues we have in our society that have not been dealt with very well. And all three of those need to be immediately addressed in our schools, in my opinion. You know, where do we go first? Well, I'll choose to look at blended learning first because I think we're going to delve into some of the issues with race and racism later on in this meeting. But Blended learning for high school, which is where I'm at, is something that's going to be very relevant. You know, we just left the full virtual quarter from March to May, and now we're going to go to a blended learning schedule at my school. So we have created 5 blended learning leaders on our key departments, and educated staff members within each department to serve as leaders regarding some summer trainings we just did. And part of this is to learn some blended learning best practices to integrate while teaching in this format. We are paying them a stipend, and they will help lead our school back to these work sessions. We hope it helps the teachers gain confidence and learn from each other as to how to navigate our new daily blended learning plans. You know, with regards to students, Dr. Johnson, we've been active with our counselors, our admin team, our social workers to identify who really struggled and for what reason during our past virtual learning quarter. This includes students who had noticeable dips in grades, low class involvement, maybe they expressed depression or anxiety or other changes in their behavior and performance. And we meet each Friday and call each one of these persons and their families to discuss some of their progress or lack of it. We also do sidewalk visits, which are socially distanced home visits, and have conversations with them. We want them to know that they're known, valued, and loved here, and that what they're feeling is not abnormal. So our supports range from Zoom tutors to local counselor meetings, parent and student virtual meetings, and even to the point where parents will call me and say, hey, can you pop on by and do a sidewalk talk to my daughter? And I'm happy to do that. But it is a challenge because we don't have the same amount of time with them that we did in the past. The personal interactions are lessened due to COVID. So what we want to know at our school is which of our students has a 105-degree fever, which means they need immediate attention. And so part of our day is spending looking at who needs it and for what reason, so we can attack the challenges with the students. But we always let our students know we love them, and there's always a chance to refurbish what we're trying to work on, because we're never done in education. And we believe in over communication, whether it's videos, phone calls, emails, YouTube links. We over communicate until people maybe might get too much of us, but we think that's a good thing.
Excellent response. Thanks so much, Principal Grauer. Let's turn back to Ms. Rothengas for a moment.
Wow, such inspirational ideas. Let's give our audience a moment to pause and write down 2 or 3 of the specific ideas you've heard so far that could be built into the capacity of educators to respond to social emotional needs. Feel free to pause this recording as needed.
So far, we've talked about various professional development topics. One important professional development topic might focus upon helping school personnel become familiar with resources that might help them address various social and emotional needs. Ms. Amici, as teachers listen to their students articulate concerns and needs, what should they know about resources available within their school, their district, or their community?
Great question. I love questions that spark action, and it is the time for each of us as educators to dig deep into our arsenal of tools to have as many strategies and resources as possible to support our students, colleagues, and our families during this intensely challenging time. As I work to envision some of the social emotional struggles that many of our groups are undoubtedly facing, I see the equity and social justice piece as being really in the forefront of the need. And for that area, I would encourage educators to start with some self-reflection. Using tools like Teach Tolerance, they have online professional development kind of tools about culture in the classroom. Take that Harvard implicit bias test, research, read, acquire trade books to read, like Stamped, Anti-Racist Baby. There's so many different movies like 13 and Just Mercy to gain your own perspective and to gain empathy and build empathy. As educators, we need to deepen our own understanding of history from the perspectives that we haven't been taught, that weren't given a voice when we were taught. And it's not too late to become a historian now. Explore your own misconceptions about race and be brave enough to acknowledge them so that you can choose to change how you think and speak and act. I hope districts might mandate that every employee read a book such as Waking Up White. following up with frequent meetings and touch bases so that we can discuss how to address those topics with our students. One of the silver linings, I think, of this time period, this digital renaissance, if you will, is the ability to find resources and to reference those from far away as opposed to just here in our local communities. I've discovered a great resource in the Inspire Citizens location. There's a woman named Kavita Tana who's amazing. She's got a lot of resources to help students and teachers to be able to create a sense of well-being for themselves and their students. As for helping students and families who have faced the trauma of isolation, powerlessness, fear, financial insecurity, and possibly interpersonal relationship struggles, we need to have the ability to access lots of resources. Teachers and guidance professionals should have mandatory and compensated training on how to create equitable spaces for their students. One fantastic source of high quality webinars are those Stanford, Inspire, and Harmony website. They're just some amazing free and really specifically designed resources to meet the needs of families as well as educators, and they're readily accessible. And finally, social emotional support can be interwoven seamlessly into the classroom by using project-based learning. PBLworks.org has lots and lots of different project ideas that are available free that help teachers to be able to incorporate relevant and authentic projects that engage students. When we connect our students with society and using our standards for guidance, it is truly magical. Asking authentic questions, providing time, space, and resources for sustained inquiry and research, and then listening to students' takeaways and ideas to solve these issues that we're facing will get us there much faster as a society. Thank you for that question, Dr. Johnson.
Thank you for that excellent detailed answer, Ms. Amici. Unfortunately, we all know that some students and families are bound to approach educators with some very serious issues. Ms. Thompson, what else can school leaders do to build the capacity of teachers to support students who are dealing with serious grief, trauma, fear, or other difficult situations or emotions?
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Teachers need to feel capable of being able to address student concerns, and that's where this capacity is being built. So in discussions with colleagues, there are certain administrative responses that can be supportive. One way is to actually model those courageous conversations so that teachers can then feel more comfortable having those courageous conversations within their own classrooms, as has been mentioned in this session. And also in my school, many of us are participating in a book study with How to Be an Anti-Racist. And there are lots of other titles that Linda Amici just mentioned. As we're reading the book, we're going to have many courageous conversations. We're going to be developing our common vocabulary. And in conversations, that's another thing that we need is a common vocabulary, a common language that can be supportive for teachers who may be struggling with the right words or with any words to be able to use for students who need to describe their feelings or need to work through that grief or trauma or fear. And contributing to that common language, we might even have those conversations with family members or with community members and also with community resources to just help educate us all so that we're having a more common language with each other to enhance that understanding. And as mentioned in a previous session, a suggestion box, a box in the building so that if there are students or staff, faculty who need to express some questions or some concerns, and they feel the need to do it with some anonymity, they have that opportunity. But a common vocabulary helps those teachers and administrators work together to address those social emotional things that students are working through. And this can also be developed through book suggestions to be able to use with students. So I talked about professional books, but also those books to read with the kids to help us again with that common language. But still, there are going to be times that teachers just don't feel capable to express serious issues with grief or trauma or fear, or that a student is going to need a different approach than the classroom teacher can provide. And in those times, having access to the school counselors or school psychologists and possibly outside resources, making those connections for the school building and for the students are things that will be helpful in those more serious situations. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Those are all such valuable ideas. As we have already been discussing, we know that many young people across the nation have been deeply influenced by issues of race, racial violence, police brutality, and civil unrest. Many of those concerns are likely to come back to classrooms in the coming months, and sometimes the teachers who receive those concerns may not know how to deal with them. We've already heard some good ideas about this topic, but I'd like all of our panelists to answer this next question. What should schools or districts plan to do to build the capacity of teachers to talk with students about issues associated with race and racism? Although I'd like all of us to respond, I'm going to ask you to try to keep your responses brief, because I noticed that we're a little bit behind our timeline. So let's start with Ms. James. What should schools and districts do to build the capacity of teachers to talk with students about issues of race and racism? Ms. James.
Yes, sir. I believe that you have to have an open dialogue. I personally have discussed with my school leadership, and we are planning on having a culturally responsive teaching PD before school starts. Some of the things that we've already talked about earlier in today's discussion is those community reads. I think a community or a common read is very vital. As an English teacher, of course, I love reading. But I think if everyone has a common read, and we discuss that, this summer I've been the leader of several common lead book discussions, and they all have been related to race and race relations. So first of all, the schools need to be willing to see that this is an issue that needs to be addressed, probably follow up with a common read, and more importantly, address the cultural responsive needs of all students, Thank you.
Great answer, Ms. James. So important. Ms. Amici, what are your suggestions?
Yeah, I just want to applaud. I think those suggestions that have been said are very good ones. And I think the idea of a comment box or some feedback, the ability to create a space for people to give feedback. One of my students said one time, the more feedback we get in the form of specific, helpful, and kind feedback, the more I wonders we get. That's a protocol we use. The more I likes we can get. And so really the more, what she was saying was, the more feedback we get, the more we can improve. And so not being afraid of that kind of feedback, being humble, being able to say, we don't really know all the answers, but we want to know. So I think for starters, just taking a stance as a school board, as a district administration, on what we feel is important and the equity that we feel is important to articulate. That really helps teachers to feel confident in going in that direction. I think that having a task force with representation from all different age levels, grade levels, different genders, cultural, religions, ethnicities, sitting on that, everybody has a voice at the table, will help us to create a space that's better for the future than it has been for the past. I think it's important to clarify that teachers should always start with building a safe classroom culture where children understand the importance of treating one another with respect and the ideas that are there with honor. And that place begins with teachers and administrators visibly demonstrating that we have the time and the space for diverse viewpoints and perspectives, and that we care about emotional and relational well-being, not just physical safety. And that's not an overnight process. It takes time. I like to really involve my students in getting the process started by creating discussion norms with them. So asking them, what kinds of discussion norms do you have that would help you to feel safe in expressing your ideas? Once we agree on guidelines, then we can begin a healthy discussion about critical topics. We need to ensure that our classrooms have literature that represents all of our students. There's a quote by Rudine Sims Bishop, books are both mirrors and windows to the world. And having books available so that each of our children feels seen and represented should be a minimum. School districts should allocate funding for this. Now, when we have literature written from all perspectives and by authors of all different ethnicities, we state wordlessly that perspectives matter, that people matter, that the lives of our students, both present and future, matter. And then I think being able to be prepared to talk about race and racism, not simply as what has happened in the past, but as a current systemic issue that we face in the world today. Understanding that systemic injustice that occurs in our society is important to acknowledge so that we can improve opportunities to improve equity. And circling back to that last point, the books can be powerful tools in this to inspire students to express themselves. Having texts that spark opportunities for discourse is a really good strategy. There are lots of them out there. We used to think about being colorblind is a good thing, but now we know that it's vital to open discussion about seeing and valuing views of people of every color. And it's important for teachers to examine the ways that race influences their classrooms every day. We have to acknowledge differences so that we can identify areas where equity needs to grow. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Amici. Ms. Jelke, what would you like to add?
I'd have to say the first and foremost thing is to educate yourself. So as a district, as a teacher, educate yourself on issues of race and racism. And as a teacher in a classroom of purely refugee and immigrants, it is so important that you seek out the opportunities yourself to find information about race, about racism, about issues that affect the students. And one of the best places to go to find information about what is affecting the students with issues of race and racism are the students. You should be talking to your students. You should be asking them questions before facilitating some type of conversation or Socratic seminar around it. Have casual conversations with your students about how they feel about school today, about the climate, how are kids treating each other in the hallway. Be visible in the hallway and see how things are happening in your school. And I believe that really starting with the students and going out and educating yourself on those issues of which they reflect is one of the main things that you can do to really help deal with issues of race and racism in your school. And on a district level, our district actually is looking to hire a director of diversity and equity currently, not as a solution to solve these problems, but just as a step in the right direction. And I think school districts really need to look into having those type of positions to help facilitate the understanding among these issues of race, racism, and cultural diversity.
What an excellent answer. Thanks so much. Ms. Freyer, what should schools and districts do to help teachers be able to address these issues of race and racism?
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. I totally agree with everyone, with all my colleagues. They've said some really great things that I was thinking. Just to add on to that, I would talk to the teachers about how to help the students have racial identity development. And what does that look like? This is a professional development that I do, is that racial identity development is the best practices on how to develop those skills for the kids to reflect in themselves and know who they are, not just as the color of their skin, but as their person, and be able to look at someone else and accept them for who they are. And that all builds their identity and just who they are and to be proud of themselves. So I would definitely try to talk to children and teachers about really teaching racial identity development. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent answer. Let's turn to our principals. Principal Sorden, what do you think should be done to build the capacity of teachers to address issues of race and racism?
So many awesome ideas were shared, and I strongly agree with first you have to do that work internally first. And I know it was mentioned by Laura. I suggest reading How to Be an Anti-Racist by Dr. Ibram X. Kendi, where he talks about persistent self-awareness, constant self-criticism, and regular examination. I suggest listening to Don Lemon's Silence is Not an Option. And then watching Chelsea Handler's Hello Privilege, It's Me, Chelsea, another good one on Netflix, so that we can first start looking at our own biases, our own behaviors, and then how is that then making its way into our classrooms. But for schools, after you do that internal work, we need to take a close look at our curriculum. And what do our read alouds look like? Who are we celebrating in our classrooms? How are our children reflected in the curriculum? And when they are reflected, how are they reflected? So once you've done that internal work, you really need to look at that curriculum. And the last thing I strongly suggest is taking a walk into your building as if you were a visitor. And what do your hallways look like? What does the entrance look like? Do you have a hello in various languages that represent your community? What are the images up in your classrooms, on the bulletin boards? Who are you celebrating? So taking a real close look at yourself, and then looking at your curriculum, and then physically taking a walk around your school buildings to see who are we celebrating and how are we celebrating them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for such important points. So what would you like to add, Principal Melhoit?
Thank you. I am blown away by the responses of everyone who's spoken so far, and wholeheartedly, yes, everything that everyone said we need to do. I would also like to add that the issues and concerns about race and racism need to be the cornerstone of the school, starting with the messaging from principals and school leaders and what that looks like, not only to our staffs, but to our communities. Are we holding multicultural events? Are we showing that we're diverse? Are we showing that we have sensitivity to those who may be experiencing race and racism? I think that also needs to be, and Principal Sorden alluded to this, that it needs to be embedded in the curriculum. We need to look at our schools holistically. I think first let's look at exposure. What are our kids and what are our families and what are our visitors to our campus being exposed to when they walk the walls of our school and they see the building? Is diverse literature prominent? Are there posters in the hallways? And if so, who's on those posters? When you have visitors, who comes to the school to visit? Is it a particular racial group or is it diverse, offering our students a multitude of backgrounds and experiences? We need to build empathy within our students, and as Ms. Amici mentioned, using diverse literature and read alouds. Our curriculum can have writing activities where students can write from various perspectives. And then coupling learning objectives with social emotional objectives. So not only can you do character feelings, but how does the character feel in regards to a racial issue? And then lastly, I think we need to empower our students and our teachers through curriculum for our students to have agency, for them to make an active stance in the world. If they're reading a book and they feel compelled to write a letter to a governor, let's allow them. If someone's at recess and there's an issue of racism, are we celebrating the students who's standing up and doing what's right? And then I think this also needs to be prioritized with every day, integrating it with our social emotional messaging, our social emotional learning, and making it part of our daily lesson cycle every single day. Thank you.
That's a great answer, Principal Melhoit. Principal Grauer, we've heard so many great ideas. What would you like to add regarding building the capacity of teachers to address issues of race and racism?
These are great ideas, Dr. Johnson. I'll just add a couple things. You know, we have a student group on race relations. We've had it for years. We don't have a teacher group though. We've had some training, but sometimes you got to get some people it's hard to be a prophet in your own land sometimes. So we have partnered with a local social justice organization called the National Conference for Community Justice of St. Louis, and they come in and actually lead some of our trainings on how to be an anti-racist. Again, we can't put all the pressure on our colleagues of color to do all the work and teach us. That isn't fair on them. And we are educated folks who've grown up in this system and benefited from it. So it's time for us to take the lead in this study, to share our blind spots, areas of growth, and to learn from them. So the goal is to be more present, empathetic, and understanding for our students, as well as self-aware. And then ask ourselves, what do we need to change in ourselves, our curriculum, and our practices to be that anti-racist goal, the person we want to be. But we know the information's out there. The question is, do we want to take it on? And as a leader, it's my job to model that, admit my faults and biases, and bring others along on this road. And that job too is ongoing, and it's never done, but we think it's worth it.
Wow, such an important answer. Thanks to all of our panelists for providing great answers to this important question. I wish every educator in this country could hear and appreciate the wisdom that you've shared. I'd like to turn now to Dr. Iniguez. Clearly, Dr. Iniguez, school district leaders have an important role in ensuring that everyone has the capacity to address important social emotional issues. But could you specifically address what district leaders might want to plan to do to build the capacity of principals to address the multitude of social emotional issues that will confront students, families, and school personnel this year?
Absolutely. We've heard some excellent ideas today, and I'll share 3 suggestions for district leaders to help maximize the possibility of these ideas coming to fruition. One is always the matter of money. So district leaders can help make clear to principals how much flexibility they have this year regarding current and new funds to address social and emotional needs, and in particular, how much of it they may use. Many states, including California, have approved waivers authorizing the flexible use of funds. 2, district leaders can also share with principals the state of negotiations with collective bargaining units, and in particular, general considerations pertaining to what principals may ask staff to do related to addressing student emotional needs. And lastly, district leaders should facilitate a safe learning environment for principals to be vulnerable away from staff, to practice leading conversations and dialogue strategies related to sensitive topics. Although the principals and teachers today may feel comfortable with it, many principals may be uncomfortable discussing loss, trauma, or racism because they're human. They may fear misspeaking, sounding racist, or unintentionally doing harm, or even having to defend their thoughts. Engaging principals in a structured practice ahead of time helps to reduce that anxiety. It's normal to feel discomfort when reflecting on our experiences about sensitive topics and our understanding of it, but the more we practice facilitating these difficult conversations, the more we will be able to manage discomfort. But being uncomfortable should not be being unsafe, or should not mean feeling unsafe. District leaders have to establish norms as principals practice discussing these topics, particularly terms that our students or staff are hearing every day in the media, such as white privilege and other particular topics. These conversations may not get easier, but this practice will help principals press toward more meaningful dialogue. And lastly, these practice sessions should also provide principals with tools and strategies to better facilitate productive discussions about sensitive topics with staff, students, and families. For example, it is sensitive, but just an example, what does a school's discipline data indicate about their perspective of cultures or races? Thank you. I now turn the webinar back to Amanda Rothengast.
Thank you so much for all our distinguished panelists today and sharing your insight and feedback and inspirational ideas. We invite everyone in our audience to join to our final live session. You will receive a link from GoToWebinar to join us on July 30th at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And you will also receive information about how to upload your plans that we may share at that live session. We look forward to helping you plan for a school year that supports every student in ways that will lead to social, emotional, and academic success. Thank you for joining us today.